Look closely. One child, 1 yard, one turn around the corner, and he was gone. No cry, no trace. Not a single person able to say, "I saw where he went." Only morning, snow, and a moment no one noticed. The tracks lead nowhere. The dogs freeze. No monsters, no folklore. Only facts that refuse to fit together. Are you sure this couldn't happen to you? Are you certain you understand how the world works? Watch and try to convince yourself otherwise. That day, March 25th, 1952, Baker County, Oregon. A clear morning, deceptively cold. The Parkins family farm stood off the main road, a wooden house with a front gable, barn beside it, corral lower down the slope. The children played outside from early morning. Keith, the youngest, not yet 3 years old, dressed in a thick jacket, suspenders on his trousers, soft-soled boots. No one was watching him closely, not out of neglect, but because here, children grew up knowing where they could go and where they could not. The father was chopping wood by the barn, the mother busy in the kitchen, the older boys tumbling in the snow, building walls, racing to the fence. Keith drifted in and out of sight, at the rain barrel, beside the steps, behind the barn, and then nothing. No panic. They simply stopped seeing him. His mother called once, twice. The eldest walked around the barn. The father checked the corral. Back to the yard. The whole space lay open. 5 minutes earlier, he was there, and now he wasn't. First, they called his name, then they searched. Under the porch, behind the woodpile, beside the empty barrel. Every place that could be checked within 10 minutes was checked. No Keith, not even footprints. The father walked along the fence. The mother went inside, hoping he had returned. The older boys searched the tree line just beyond the slope. That was when the fear began, because in 5 to 7 minutes, a child his size could cover no more than 100 steps. And every step of that ground was covered. No sound, no prints in the fresh snow, and above all, no person in the area who had seen him pass. It was a weekday. Neighbors were at work. The road, empty. The yard, silent. Keith was not yet 3. He didn't know where to go. He couldn't open the gate. He couldn't walk the fence line. The only world he had was the circle of ground where he always played. And yet, in that circle, he was gone. When every corner of the yard had been checked, the parents called for neighbors. First from the nearest farm, then from across the ravine. By 4 p.m., more than a dozen people were searching the property. All locals, all experienced. They knew how to look. They carried sticks, lanterns, some with kerosene lamps. The group split off, some toward the ravine, others toward the tree line. The snow was dense, slippery, visibility clear. One man followed the old trail to the creek. Others moved along the forest edge. They swept beneath the trees, by the animal pen, by the roadside ditch. Not one print of small boots, no scraps of fabric, not even a dent in the snow. The neighbors brought their dogs. They moved calmly, aimlessly. None pulled on a leash. None barked toward the trees. Normally, a dog will chase the scent of a child, race to clothing, seize the trail. This time, they simply wandered beside their owners, as if nothing at all had happened, and it was then that people began to feel it. The problem wasn't in how they searched, and it wasn't in anyone's neglect. Everything was being done correctly, and nothing gave results. Nothing at all. All hope turned to the snow. Snow was always the one witness you could count on. Snow holds tracks, always. It shows who went where, when, how fast, but this time, it showed nothing. There were a few prints from the door to the barn, and after that, emptiness. One man, quiet, not prone to words, stepped to the father. He only said, "It doesn't happen this way." No shouts, no hysteria, just tired certainty. And in that moment, others silently agreed. Yes, something here was wrong. By 6, the sun dropped sharply behind the trees. The shadow of the barn stretched long across the snow. The yard grew colder. Some lit kerosene lamps, but the light was weak, scattering into the air. Vision shrank. Clarity did not improve. The same sectors were covered again. Those who had swept the slope by the creek in the morning returned there once more, this time moving in pairs. They stepped carefully at the edges so as not to trample what might still be evidence, each foot placed along the lines already trodden. Near the house, someone spread a tarp on the snow and sketched a map of the area by hand. It was redrawn twice, trying to track which sectors had been checked, yet even then the same feeling hung. Something remained unseen. One man suggested the old well, long unused. 3 went to search it. The well was dry, empty. The cold hardened. The snow under boots began to crunch differently, sharper, drier, and though no one said it aloud, the thought sank into everyone. If the boy was not found before nightfall, then things would only get harder and far more dangerous. Behind the barn, the search was especially thorough. It was the most logical place a child might go. Every corner checked, under barrels, beneath the steps, behind the barn, even inside the old wagon once used for sacks of grain. Empty. Disagreements began. One man insisted, "You're searching in the wrong place." Another, "We need to sweep the road to town." But the town lay 6 kilometers away, and in all that time, no one had reported seeing a small child. If he had walked that road, someone would have noticed. Inside the house, they rechecked his clothing. The jacket still hung by the door, but the boots, the ones everyone thought he'd been wearing, were missing. That uncertainty spread confusion. Was he in those boots, or had he wandered out in socks? No one could say for certain. By 9 p.m., night had set in. Someone lit a fire at the property's edge, not for warmth, just as a marker. If the boy was nearby, maybe he would see it. Maybe he would come back, though few believed that anymore. 2 men arrived from the neighboring town. One, a hunter, claimed he knew the land. He took a lantern and rifle and walked the tree line, the cattle run, the hill where the empty hayloft stood. An hour and a half later, he returned. He said only, "There's nothing out there." Everyone understood the truth. Deeper into the woods meant greater risk. In darkness, it was too easy to get lost, too easy to miss what mattered. By 10 o'clock, the temperature had dropped to -6. The snow beneath boots had turned brittle, sharper with each step. Those who had been eager in the morning now moved cautiously. Breaths short, steps measured, moving in small bursts between familiar points. The fire by the barn smoldered, more smoke than heat. The search had not ended, but it had stopped expanding. No one risked going beyond the creek or the tree line. Those who did venture out returned silent. There was nothing left to say. They all knew the child could not be far, and if he was far, that meant someone had carried him. But then there would have been tracks, and there were none. One elder neighbor, respected for his clear judgment, finally spoke aloud. "If he's still alive, it's a miracle." He wasn't speaking to anyone in particular, just into the night, because the cold was now so sharp even grown men shook in their gloves, and the boy was not yet 3. He had been gone nearly 8 hours. After midnight, a deeper quiet fell, not because the searchers left, most of them stayed, but because the shouting had stopped. There was no sense in calling. They had called all day, every corner, every pitch of voice, every name, every tone already spent. If he could have answered, he would have, and the night kept its silence. The people did not leave, but they no longer searched. They sat, silent, smoking, huddled near the fire. Sometimes one would rise, walk a slow circle across the yard, just to keep warm, then return and sit. The father still moved, alone, the same path over and over, from the door to the barn, from the barn to the old bench near the creek, back again, slowly, steadily, as if trying to catch the moment he had missed in daylight. The mother stayed at the window, the room behind her warm, but she never moved from the glass. Someone unfolded the old map again. Flags shifted, lines redrawn. One man muttered, "Maybe we started in the wrong place." But no one answered. Every thought had already been spoken, out loud and to themselves. By 1 a.m., the truth had settled. Chances were nearly gone. In such cold, a child would not last until morning, not without shelter, not without food. Everyone knew this. Still, no one left. By dawn, the question, "Where could he be?" was no longer asked. It had fallen silent an hour before sunrise, as if all understood. Thinking in that direction had no meaning anymore. The night sank to -7. Frost-coated grass and boards alike, the benches, clothes, lanterns rigid with cold, faces burned raw from wind, fingers stiff, barely bending. At 7:30, Arthur Black, a distant relative on the mother's side, arrived from across the valley. At first light, he chose to walk the old dirt road toward the abandoned pasture line. The place had always been dismissed. Too far, they had said. No 2-year-old could reach it. An hour and a half later, 19 kilometers from home, he saw it, a dark shape against the snow. At first he thought it was an animal, then he saw the body, a child, alive. Kit Parkins lay on his side, legs drawn up, eyes open, face calm, his jacket fastened, mittens absent, cheeks red but not frostbitten, boots still on his feet, breathing. When Arthur called his name, Keith stirred faintly, as if waking from sleep, then whispered, "I walked." Arthur lifted him up, carried him back. The boy was warm, not fevered, not frozen, just alive. No cuts, no bruises, no blood, only a reddened nose and flakes of snow clinging to his collar. When Arthur returned, the others refused to believe, until they saw him. When the mother was told, she sat down, no scream, no tears, just one question, "Where?" And when she heard the answer, no one spoke, because 19 kilometers, across hills, through brush and barbed wire, past fences and creeks, that is not the distance a 2-year-old child walks, not at night, not without light, not without aim. When Keith was brought back to the farm, a local doctor examined him immediately. Arthur had carried the boy the whole way, and Keith had simply slept in his arms. No crying, no protest, just resting. The exam took 10 minutes. Body temperature, normal, no signs of hypothermia. Cheeks and nose, windburned but not frozen. Scrapes, minimal, one on the palm, another beneath the knee. Clothing, buttoned, intact, dry. Boots, dry. Mittens, missing, but the hands showed no injury. The doctor said aloud, "This doesn't happen." Not meaning a miracle, but physiology. 2 years old, a night in sub-freezing cold, crossing hills, mud, snow, branches, icy water. And after all that, the child is found lying in the snow, not unconscious, not injured, alive, clear-minded, not even exhausted. When asked, "Where were you?" the boy whispered only, "I just walked," then said nothing more. To every other question he only nodded, not afraid, not shocked, simply too tired to speak. No one pressed him, no one insisted, because even if he had recited every step, every hour, not 1 minute of that journey could have formed a logical chain. He was alive, and that was the only fact all could agree on. Everything else remained unanswered. Later, one relative spread a map across the table. Paper, old, hand-drawn marks. The place where Keith was found, marked with a cross. The farm, a circle. Then they drew a line, straight distance, a little over 19 kilometers. But there was no straight road. To reach that point on foot, one would have to cross at least 2 hills of medium slope, 1 ravine carrying water in spring, an old barbed wire fence 50 meters long, thickets usually cut only by hunters, and a stretch where even grown men said, "The ground swallows to your knee." None of the adults had managed that same route in that same time, not even by daylight, and here was a child of 2, covering it overnight, in 19 hours, even if he had started the moment he vanished, never stopping, never resting, never stumbling. It would still be the march of an adult. Keith did not know the land. No one in his family had ever told him what lay beyond that hill. At the spot where he was found, there were no clear tracks leading in. The snow around him was flat, no trampled patches, no drag marks, no fall marks, no tracks of wolves, no footprints of people, no sign of vehicles. It was as if he had simply appeared there. At the farm, no one argued. No one tried to explain. They only stared at the map and said nothing, because any attempt to explain how he had walked there sounded more absurd than the disappearance itself. One of the first details picked apart was the behavior of the dogs. On that first day, several local dogs joined the search. They weren't service animals, but grown, trained, with hunting noses. They were given his clothing to scent, jacket, mitten, cap. One dog went as far as the barn, stopped, smelled the snow, made a few small circles, then sat. The second moved a bit farther, along the barn, turned at the corner, then also stopped. Both refused to continue, not frightened, not confused, just stopped, looking at their owners, not moving forward. None tried to lead into the forest, toward the ravine, toward the fields, and certainly not in the direction where he would later be found, not even a hint. The next morning, when the men drew a line on the map from the point of disappearance to the point of discovery, that was the question none could answer. Why hadn't even one dog signaled that way? One old man said it simply, "Dogs are not people. They don't lie. If he had gone that way, they would have known." It was a phrase repeated for years afterward, in reports, in conversations, because everything else could be chalked up to chance, but not the dogs. When doctors examined him, the verdict was clear. Pulse, normal. Hydration, within range. A little sluggish, but not exhausted. Yet he had carried no food, no water. From evening to morning, 19 hours, he had eaten nothing. His mother added that he had not taken dinner before vanishing. Only a cup of milk and a scrap of bread. No thermos, no snacks, no spare clothes. He was found in the same jacket he wore from the house, mittens missing. Cap pushed aside, but his condition, stable. What astounded the doctor most was not that he survived, but that he did not look tired, no shivering, no confusion in his words, no falling asleep in arms. He scanned the room, watched faces, at one point even asked for water, calmly, without panic. He drank, then fell quiet again. When undressed, no bruises, no scratches, no dehydration, only his hands, slightly cool, and even that far less than expected. No one understood. Where had he been? What had he done through those long hours? If his body showed no stress, if his manner showed no survival struggle, he wasn't feral, he wasn't in shock, he wasn't depleted, he was simply fine. When it all settled, when he had been given water, seated, wrapped in a blanket, silence came. They looked at him, and they looked at the map beside him on the table. On it, the farm, the point of disappearance, the point where he was found. Distance between them, the length of an arm across the paper. 19 kilometers in a straight line, over 20 with the terrain. And no one could explain how he had reached it. Not a man, not a dog, had pointed in that direction. Every search ran to the forest, to the creek, to the ravine, but not there, not to that slope. Even by accident, no one wandered that way. One man, who had been sitting off to the side all morning, finally spoke quietly. "We walked past, and we never saw even a trail. There's nothing there, but he was." Another man only nodded. "It's like he was there from the start." No one followed up. There were no words, because there was no line between the place he began and the place he was found. Only the child himself, nothing in between. The next day, while Keith slept safely under watch in a warm room, one of the men, Michael Stenson, his father's cousin, made a decision. "I want to walk it myself, just to see if it's even possible." He set out in daylight. Light pack, good boots, warm clothes, map in his pocket, the weather clear, no wind, snow crust hardened by sun. The route was known, from the farmhouse to the point where the boy had been found. 2 hours later, Michael returned, sweat pouring, kneeling, the fabric of his pants torn, a scrape on his finger. He moved heavily. He said only one thing. "I made it halfway, no further. There's a drop, then wire, then a snarl of deadfall. I couldn't get through. I had to turn back." This was a grown man, with boots, with a map, with clear knowledge of the route, and in full daylight. Keith's mother listened in silence. His father gave no reply. The rest only exchanged glances, because now it was undeniable. If the boy had walked that way, then he had passed through territory that a grown man failed to cross. No torn clothes, no cut hands, no trace of struggle. Afterward, when they examined his clothing carefully, slowly, without rushing, everyone expected to see it. Mud stains, soaking from snow, pulled buttons, at the very least, signs of melting frost. But there was nothing. His trousers were dry, untorn, jacket buttoned high, every button in place, hem clean, as if he had sat, not crawled, collar straight, only the cap, slightly shifted off to the side, no worse. On his socks, no dirt, no ice. On his boots, just a dusting of snow. The same look you might see on a man who stepped outside for 5 minutes, not on a child found after a night alone in the open. The soles were unworn, not packed with mud, not wet through. Mittens missing, yes. But his hands were not white, not blue, only faintly cold. No mark on the back, no bruises on the knees, not even abrasions on the elbows. This was the child who had been searched for through the night, whom all had imagined lost anywhere, in a thicket, a ravine, a creek bed, beneath barbed wire. And yet he looked as though he had spent the night on a porch, wrapped in a blanket. Arthur Black, the man who found him, repeated the same. He didn't look like someone who walked that distance. He didn't look like someone who had gone anywhere at all. When they brought him home and laid him down, everyone waited for one thing, that he would speak, explain, say where he had been, why he hadn't cried, why he hadn't returned, anything. But he said very little, softly, simply. When asked, "Where were you?" he answered, "I walked, and I arrived." At first they thought it was shock, exhaustion, fear, but within half an hour he was eating calmly, drinking water, sitting quietly by the stove, fingering the buttons of his jacket, looking out the window, and still no more words. When someone tried again, where exactly he had gone, who might have been nearby, if he had seen anyone, he only shook his head. Not yes, not no, just a small gesture, as if he did not want to answer, or did not know what to say, or did not consider it necessary. His mother watched him, unable to understand. He didn't look lost. He didn't look frightened. He looked as if everything was fine, as if a night in the snow was nothing more than a walk. And his words, "I walked, and I arrived," sounded not like a story, but like a conclusion. That became the strangest part. He wasn't lying. He wasn't confused. He wasn't inventing. And yet he said nothing that explained even a single kilometer of those 19. Later, when he had been examined, fed, put to rest, someone said aloud, "Maybe that's enough. Thank God he's alive. The rest doesn't matter." But no one answered. Not because they wanted to complicate things, but because nothing added up. One fact, Kit Parkins was alive. Second fact, he was found 19 kilometers from where he vanished. The route, across terrain, a grown man could not finish. No tracks, no dogs leading that way, no witnesses, and the boy himself, unwilling or unable to explain. The only solid element in the story was him. Everything else felt unstable, as if he had been cut out from one place and set down in another. How he got there was proven by nothing. Nothing but his presence. The place where Keith was found had many names. Some called it the Upper Line. Others, the Abandoned Pasture. Most simply said, where no one goes. It was a strip of overgrown land between two slopes, once used for cattle. But years ago, the chute broke. The fence rotted, and the land was left untouched. No trails, no fields, no reason for anyone to enter for at least 10 years. To reach it from the Parkins farm meant crossing a ravine, old barbed wire, 2 swampy patches, and a thicket so tight even grown men had to turn sideways to push through. The shortest distance was no less than 15 kilometers. The realistic route, closer to 19. When locals finally walked there the next day, they understood at once why no one had searched it that first night. The snow was deep, the ground uneven, every step difficult even by daylight. Branches hung low, snagging at clothes. The soil gave way under boots. No paths, no landmarks. And yet, that was where he lay, at the edge of the field, beneath a fir. Nothing beside him, no tracks, no trail, no trampled patch in the snow, not even birds overhead, as if the place itself had chosen him. That silence gnawed hardest at the father. He walked to the spot after the others, stood there, looked around, and only said, "People don't come here, ever." On the 3rd day after he was found, what had been only unspoken thoughts finally came out aloud. One man, strong, quiet, who had hauled wood all night, said simply, "If he didn't walk here, who carried him?" The group fell silent, because there was no good answer. If a man had carried him, where were the tracks, the drag marks, the scuffed clothing? At least one adult boot print in the snow? If an animal, why leave him untouched? Why not harm him? Why place him carefully? And most of all, how carry him 19 kilometers without injury, if it was something else? Everyone understood it was best not to follow that thought, not in words, not even in guesses. One neighbor recalled that years earlier, 15, maybe more, someone had tried to build a storage shed there. They began to dig, then abandoned the project. Since then, no one had gone back. The locals remembered. And so, on the night of the search, no one entered that section of land. Because they all knew a child could never reach it. And if he could not reach it, then someone took him there. And if someone took him there, then why leave him alive? Why leave him unharmed? Why set him down gently instead of making it worse? No one answered, not because they refused, but because no one knew how to begin. Within days, the Parkins farm looked the same again. The barn as it was, dogs running loose, Keith's father repairing the gate, his mother washing all the clothes. Neighbors had gone home, but something still lingered, not outside, but inside everyone who was there that night. No one argued. No one told the story of what really happened. Even those prone to talkative retellings stayed silent. They understood. There were no explanations. And to force one would only make it worse. Some tried to discuss the route, some the dog's behavior, some why he never froze. But no conversation lasted more than a sentence or two. Everyone knew it never fit, and maybe it never should. One old man, who had sat by the fire that night and remained silent through the morning, later said, "Some cases fit the paper, and some, like this one, the paper just tears, and you don't even see where." He added nothing more, and no one asked what he meant, because sometimes people sense, pull the thread, and it all unravels. Leave it, and at least it stays whole. Years have passed since Keith Parkins was found. He grew up. The family moved on. The farm now belongs to others. But those who searched that night remember not the calls, not the cold, not the miles, but that feeling. The moment when you know how the world is supposed to work, and it simply doesn't. Psychologists later called it dissociation. Some argued young children can do more than adults expect. Others pointed to stress survival, the body's hidden reserves. It all sounded reasonable, provided you never saw the map, never stood at the start, never stood at the place where he was found. Because if a child could not walk there and no one ever saw him and no animal gave the trail, then the final question remains: how did he get there at all? And this is what remains: a path no child could walk, a body with no marks of struggle, no sign of exhaustion, a reaction as if he had only stepped around the corner and then come back. And above all, silence, his silence. Because if you truly don't know how you arrived in another place, what could you possibly say? Maybe he didn't hide anything. Maybe the story itself simply cannot be told in human language. It doesn't fit fear. It doesn't fit logic. It doesn't fit aversion. Sometimes it feels like we forget. Most strange stories are not anomalies. They are gaps, places where ordinary rules stop working, and you are left staring at only one fact: he was alive. Everything else, you have to explain yourself. So, what do you think? How could a 2-year-old boy walk nearly 20 kilometers through snow at night and not earn a single scratch? Why did the dogs refuse every direction, offering no lead at all? And if he did not walk there himself, then who carried him? Leave your thoughts in the comments.